In the eyes, in the eyes, in the eyes.
Yeah, we can absolutely drink
in
coffee.
The eyes of the song.
Good. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Like Flowers on a Molten Lawn, a podcast on the making of Matt's latest album. Matt, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you? Thanks for being here.
I'm good. My name is Sasha. I am the host of the Creative Mood podcast. And graciously, Matt offered to get me included in the project, in the telling of this story. And so we are going to be here to discuss the songs in detail, as well as listen to some demos and some performances on acoustic guitar and on piano. That's quite a lot, and I'm really excited for this.
Yeah. Thank you for accepting the invitation.
We're here to talk about your fourth record. I got it right this time. Like Flowers on a Molten Lawn. Typically, it always feels like the third and fourth record are very important records for an artist. Well, they're all important, but they all mean something very different. Your first one, oftentimes, you have a lot of time to catch all these songs and you can work them over a set amount of years. It's kind of like your best of so far.
Yeah,
and then your second one
that you've written your entire life.
Yeah, so it's almost like an easy record in that sense,
Somewhat, yeah.
And then the second one, if you've had any kind of success, there's a bit more pressure on it because now it's like, what are you going to do now?
But also, you've been writing, like the first 10 songs took you 10 years to write, and now you have 6 months to write the next 10. And you're like, oh, how am I going to do this? It took so long the first time around. How am I going to accelerate the process along with all of that pressure,
And then you make the third one, which I can only assume is you can sort of breathe just a little and expand a little. And then the fourth one, from my perspective, really feels your widest record. It feels like the most...
You mean my record or
your record?
Fourth records?
Your
general?
Fourth record.
Yeah. I think it has a lot to do with the confidence. It's... You make your first record, it's your first record. You've never done anything like that before. Mm-hmm. The whole process is new to you, and you might have other people who are more experienced than you who guide you along the way of like the writing, pre-prodding, recording, mixing, mastering phases of a record. and that's not including visuals and promo and all that other stuff, but just the pure making of a record is something that you don't really know how to go through the flow. And then the second time you kind of get it, and then the third and fourth, and I guess subsequently all the other records, you start having more of a confidence because you know what's coming next. So you're able to better prepare for each step of the way. And I also, in my case, like musically, I've evolved a great amount that came from never touring at all, like doing sort of like open mic bar gigs, doing like acoustic covers of songs, to like touring, like proper touring, and with a band and with like all these musicians that are incredible musicians. They're all 100 times better than me, and in every way technically, and so to learn from them over a period of a couple of years, and then do also a couple of records, and finding out developing my taste and what it is that I like, and being able to verbalize it to people. It's so I got to the fourth record and it was like way easier because I was armed with all of this knowledge that I accrued prior, So
do you get into that space of making a record thinking, what am I trying to say? What am I going to say? Or is it really just sort of even more simple and it's just like, I'm going to do what I do? Or is there, what's the thought process behind it for you?
This time around musically, I think thematically, it's a lot of just like expressing what it is that I'm thinking about at that moment, be it something very personal or something that I extracted from a book or a movie or a conversation. There's a lot of that. And then like the full meaning of a record, I tend to like reverse engineer that stuff, where it'll be this sort of subliminal or subconscious meaning that becomes clear to me as more and more songs come about. The first 2-3 songs kind of feel like sporadic or random, and then you get to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,
Pattern emerges.
and then you're like, oh, okay, it seems like my soul is trying to say this in all these different kinds of ways. And so it becomes more and more apparent as I write more songs. And then once the songs are picked for the album, then I start to wrap my head around, because you're going to get the obvious questions of what is this record about? And then you have to have an answer. And sometimes it's just like, I don't know, it's a bunch of different random thoughts.
But that's a good answer.
But so that was kind of the way that I realized that after Weird Ones, the producer of that record, Connor Seidel, was the one who kind of made me realize, he's like, yeah, you don't really know what you're trying to do until it's done, and then you realize that that's what you did. And I think that that's true for all the records, and it's especially true for this one, because I really didn't know what to talk about on this one thematically. I had no idea what I wanted to say, and it wasn't until it was completely done that it made just complete sense. And musically was different in this time around, because I set out, I had very specific goals in mind in songwriting. I wanted to play guitar less, because guitar is my principal instrument, and I'm better at guitar than any other instrument. And I wanted to challenge myself by doing things a little differently. So I played more piano, and I wanted to write a lot of music using a drum machine. So I was getting really interested in various types of beatboxes and everything, but more than like the technical side of the beatbox stuff, I wanted to write music to a rhythm. I wanted it to groove and swing it a different way.
Right.
And I've always played in this sort of like legato way. When I play a guitar, it's speeding up and slowing down with the emotion, and I wanted something that was a little groovier.
That's driving you instead of the other way around.
Exactly. So that so I had a very specific idea of what I wanted the music to feel like in terms of movement, and then it just ended up in a million different directions. But
you have a lot of it's very lush, this record, and it's not that the other records weren't lush, but I don't know, it's so expansive. How do you compare, in your words, how do you compare the last one to this one?
It's more lush. I had more ideas.
Okay.
I had more ideas, and I wanted to try more things. I wanted to be like bolder. I think that I had a really specific direction for Weird Ones in terms of how I wanted to make the record to make you feel. And it was, I want this to be a record that you can fall asleep to, but that you could also rock out to in your car.
Okay.
So that was a really difficult thing.
That's very specific.
Like if you're on a road trip and you blast some music, and you could, it doesn't have to be like heavy or anything, but you can really headbang to it when you blast it. But if you put it down, low volume, you can take a nap to it. And
wow.
And I really wanted that to sound like that. And the end result, I think it ended up being that, which is nice. And in this case, it was more like, I don't know. I had a lot of musical ideas, and I wanted to create simple songs that had interesting and recognizable melodies, but I didn't want them to be like pop songs.
Right.
So I wanted to find interesting ways to garnish those songs with all the spices of music, and try a lot of different sounds that I've never really let myself use. Maybe less organic sounds.
It feels that way for sure.
Yeah. And yet there's still like we have like a whole orchestra on there, so like it doesn't get more organic than that. But then I really delved into a lot of like drum machine and synths and all this other stuff, so which was new to me. So it was kind of like, oh, I just figured out, like, I was always a bit of a Luddite, and I didn't want. I remember seeing like a show one time, and somebody using a bass synth. It was at Metropolis in Montreal, and this huge bass, huge sound. The whole place was like vibrating, and everybody was just so enthralled. And I was like, just playing it like a C, and like it literally.
This is fake.
Well, it felt like a cheap trick to get people to feel something, but it was just. I was like, it's just molecules vibrating us, and that's what's making us feel, and that's not like, that doesn't mean anything. And I think that at that time I was so focused on like words being the only way to convey meaning, when truly music is just molecules vibrating us.
Yeah.
And I began to not only not hate it, but I began to love it. And I had this conversation with a friend one time where we're like, we're both sort of acoustic-ish singer-songwriters for some time, huge Dylan fans and everything. I was talking about this specific example, and he goes, do you think that if like Dylan in the 60s had like all this like modular synthesis and like bass synths and everything, maybe he would have used it in the same way? I mean, those things existed back then, but they weren't popularized in the way, like if the trends back then were like James Blakey glitchy drums with bass synth all over the place and modified vocals and all that stuff, would he have done that? And I think the answer is yes.
I think so too.
You know, now he wouldn't because he's Dylan and he's older, but
maybe he makes those records and we don't even
hear it. That'd be crazy.
You know what I mean? When he passes away, we just like have these Dylan modular synth albums.
Wow.
I'm here for it.
Great.
So it feels like really what you're saying to me is that your vision of what music is has evolved.
Completely. Mm-hmm. It's become less restricted by, I guess, just the echo chamber that was the genre of music that I was making, and the people that I spent time with who were also within this genre. You kind of like, and I've always listened to so many different kinds of music, and once I started to accept that there were certain musics that didn't really fit with what I was doing, but that they could still influence me, that was a really eye-opening moment. And I remember another conversation that I had that was about how interesting it is that modern production doesn't have any like rules about what can or can't be included in a production, in the same way that, let's say, folk music has to be, you know, rootsy acoustic instruments. It has to be, you know, banjo, acoustic guitar.
The rules of each style, you know, so to speak.
Whereas like modern production in like pop or rap or, you know, they'll just do anything. It doesn't matter if it sounds cool. Like, it could be a synth, it could be a bongos, it could be a cello, it could be a marxophone. Like, it doesn't really matter if the vibe is good, then the rules are not really important.
Yeah, I really hear you, man. I feel that like when I was making, when I started my solo project, it really was this idea of like, now that I'm alone, let's let my style be whatever I make. And for a lot of people, it's that thing of like, well, I'm a singer-songwriter and I have a guitar and that's what I do.
Exactly.
And then you're sort of unwillingly, unknowingly sometimes, and I'm assuming that's what I'm understanding from you, is that that's what it was for a moment. And then as you progress, it feels like you're just opening up more and more. And for sure, I feel that on this record, you threw everything on the canvas. And it's all there and it's beautiful.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we threw a lot of shit at the canvas.
When did you start making those songs? Actually, let me be more specific. When was the first song you did for that song created-ish? How long ago was that?
The first one, and it's interesting that you use the word lush to describe the album, because one of the lyrics in this song called Gardens v Mowers is watch the lush garden from the high window. And I wrote that first verse when I was in Banff. I got this grant to do a residency at the Banff Art Center.
What?
And it was awesome. They gave me like a cabin for 6 or 7 weeks, and I had a cabin to myself. I flew to Banff, and I just like, and it's kind of like I don't want to say it was a missed opportunity in a sense, because I don't, had I known then technically what I know now, I could have like made 2 records while I was there. But I was kind of at a point where I just finished this like enormous tour. I was burnt out, and I used it as like part rest, part creation. So I maybe wrote less than I would have liked to in that period of time, but it was very healing, and I think just that was important to my creative process. And so Gardens v Mowers, that first beginning bit, I wrote while I was there, and that was actually a piece of music that I'd presented for the making of Weird Ones, because I did that band residency before Weird Ones. And I wrote what else did I write while I was there? I think I wrote the Highlands off of Weird Ones while I was there. Yes, I did. And yeah, Gardens v Mowers was one that, and it wasn't called that at the time. I don't remember what it was called, but it was called something else. And I presented it to the band, and we had a bunch of other demos, but this one wasn't finished. So everyone was like, yeah, it sounds cool, but like finish the song and then we can, and then we had other songs. So I didn't finish it, and it just kind of went back into the hard drive, and I didn't think about it for quite some time. And when we started working on this process, I just opened up the drive and I was like, let's look at all the old shit that I got.
So you do that too. Okay.
Yeah, and some of it, most of it, got trashed. There's still a bunch of actually stuff that like from the vault, that,
From the vault.
from the vault,
Okay.
where I kind of go, oh, this is really, really, really cool, and I want to use this, but like it's not gonna work for this particular project, or it doesn't work in this vibe, or like I need to work this in a different way. There's a couple of songs that I almost released and that I actually like started performing a lot solo that were part of that, but I was like, actually no, these are more like rootsy acoustic guitar stuff, which I still love, and I want to do a project like that. So for everyone who's like missing the acoustic stuff from Old Man, I want to do that too, but that's not where I was at this point. So I wanted to meet the ideas that I had in my mind, and I wanted to, like, I started something I felt with Weird Ones, and I felt like I didn't get 100% of the way to what I had in my mind, and I think that I think I almost got there with like Flowers on a Molten Lawn.
Wow.
But I might still have now. Yeah, I think that idea is kind of complete, but it sort of planted the seed for a few new ideas. So yeah, so Gardens V Mowers was that first one. So that was like we're talking 2018.
Wow. Okay, so you do carry songs over a period of time. It's always reassuring to me. I like to ask that of artists, because sometimes it's so intimidating to me when someone says, "Yeah, I wrote that song like like 2 weeks before the record was out."
Oh yeah, I've done that before. I have on Solitudes. There's a song called L'Imposteur
Okay.
that I've had a love-hate relationship with, but it seems people really like it. And there was one that the record was done, like we're done, we're starting to mix the record, and I wrote the song like in an afternoon, and I write to Connor, who was producing the record, and I was like, Connor, we got to put the song on the record. And there's a train coming, so we're gonna hear that train. And so Connor's like, well, we're done and we don't have any more money for the studio, so why don't you come over to my apartment and we'll try to record it there. So we recorded.
Oh, no way.
We recorded that song in his bathroom.
What? Sick.
And we did the whole thing like in a day, and it worked out.
Why do you have a love-hate relationship with that song?
That's a complicated one. We maybe don't want to go too deep in that, but
Sure.
It's more or less that it's a song, it's a ballad, which depending on the type of person you are, you might love ballads or hate them. I think ballads can be really nice and people really appreciate them, but to play them over and over and over again, it becomes like real cheesy.
Oh, right.
And there's also this element of like, and I'm kind of over this part, and it's a really long discussion to be had. Maybe
if only we were on a
podcast that we could talk about it forever. But it was in a nutshell, L'Imposteur was the French song, obviously, and I have a French public as well, and there's a segment of the francophone population that really, really like, they really want me to write more French music, and I love writing French music because I am half French, but it doesn't come as easily to me. It's kind of like saying, for me, writing a French song is like playing the drums.
Right.
I can kind of hold a beat, but it's not going to be very good, And if you want me to do something properly, it's going to take a little bit more time to do it well. And so I also had this. I wondered whether people liked the song because it was good or because it was French, and so that bothered me quite a bit. And now I don't really care. I just think it's fun to play, and I love that people enjoy it, and it makes me happy to play it for people.
But it is difficult. I mean, and we can't really sort of we can't not acknowledge this. It is in itself. It's an experience to be an English musician, so to speak, in a French province. It in itself, whether you know it or you don't, it informs the work.
Sure.
Sure,
and it has for this record too. On Weird Ones, there were no French songs. So my first Old Man had one French song, Solitudes had two, Weird Ones had none. And it wasn't. I think there was definitely something in the subconscious that kept me from doing it, because I was like, I don't like. It feels like there's more pressure to make a good French song. It's really hard to make a good French song, especially in the genre that I do it. Like a friend of mine once told me, like, rock music is English. It was like made in English, and like any other language just sounds weird. And so I agree to disagree on that, but I do find it really hard to sing I sing in a way that where like the words are sort of very malleable, whereas French is a language that is much more rigid in pronunciation. So it makes it more difficult to make a song that is not a ballad, actually, and to be a little freer. And some people do that really well, but I find it difficult. So it just happened that for Weird Ones, like I didn't have one in me. And so when we recorded it, it was just like, we're going to take the 10 best songs that we have. And I did have a French song at the time, but it just wasn't that good. So I didn't put it on, you know? Anyway, it had nothing to do with the language. It was just kind of shit. And then with this record, I wrote a song that I really, really, really liked in French.
I think it's great.
I enjoyed it a lot. And it was a lot of fun making the song, because it really went like, you know, this a song called La Lune est morte de rire. And it went from like one vibe to a completely different vibe. And it was a really fun process so the producer for this record, Pietro Amato, he and I like embarked on this journey where I hired him as a producer, but I also asked him if he would be like a mentor to me with regards to like music production and arrangement and just like basic studio flow.
Right, that's something we haven't talked about yet, but keep on.
So La Lune est morte de rire, I think, is like a perfect example of the type of song that would not have come to be the way that it is if it wasn't for that process. And the process was so important to getting to that result. And in the end, I've loved the song, and I was, you know, I had other songs that I liked a lot, and we cut a couple of songs for this record that I really loved, but this one fit in the vibe better. So it stayed, and it had nothing to do with language. It was just a good song.
Yeah, the best songs win, inevitably.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful song. And that's another thing I wanted to talk about, the fact that last time we spoke, the first time we spoke when you came on my podcast, you had expressed to me a strong desire, and I think you were sort of getting into that gear of learning to produce, and I think producing is a big word, but like sort of widening your net and learning to play different instruments and machines and processes. And it feels like, you know, and it's funny because I have re-listened to that conversations a couple times since it happened. And that's exactly what you did. You just sort of put yourself out there, and you really co-produced this record.
Yeah, I'd say it was
in a more hands-on.
I'd say it was like 75-25.
Okay.
You know, obviously Pietro is way like years ahead of me in terms of engineering and arrangement and production and musicality, basically everything except harmony. Well, he is. I mean, in like at those jobs, he's like, yeah, of course he's better. I just because I learned how to use, you know, microphones a year ago doesn't mean I'm an engineer. It doesn't mean I learned how to use Pro Tools this year that I'm a producer. And
no, but it's
though a lot of people think that because they know how to use Pro Tools, they're producers.
I got the plugin.
Yeah, I got the plugins. I know how to, you know, I got the auto EQ thing.
If I bought it, I'm a pro.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I learned how to plug in a MIDI controller.
Well, we're still, I think it's really commendable that you sort of put yourself out there, and that, you know, it could have, from experience and from knowing a whole bunch of people, it could have taken you years.
It will.
Before you
It will.
Before you put out the next record. You know, like this one.
Yeah.
You could have said, hey, I'm going to take like 4, 5, 6 years before I do it.
I think that the reason why it won't and it couldn't and it didn't for this one is that I don't see this as being like, I don't want to take everybody else's job. Like, I don't want to learn how to do this because I think that I can get away with not having like an engineer and a producer and an arranger. It's that I can contribute in more interesting ways, and I can help guide the music in a more specific way. And I think that was like a huge limitation with the previous records, where I didn't speak the same language as the musicians or the producer.
Mm-hmm.
And now I speak like a broken producer engineer, you know, where I have a basic understanding of it, and I can work on stuff on my own as well, where I'm not relying on somebody to press record and to learn how to mic a guitar or whatever. If I mic a guitar, it's probably going to sound far inferior to you know, somebody that I work with who's an engineer, but I might be able to get really good ideas out of doing that. And sometimes like shitty recordings can be salvaged if they're put in the context of other good recordings. And sometimes the spirit of the performance in the moment, you know, supersedes the quality of the sound, you know.
Of course.
that's kind of the spirit in which I went in. It wasn't like I think I can do better than anyone. It was more like I now can contribute and feel like I'm not showing up with these bare bones songs, and that we end up with a finished product that is like, yes, it's mine, but
it's been transformed too much.
yeah, I wanted to have a little more control, and the only way to have more control is to be more knowledgeable. So that's it. Just learn a bunch of stuff, and
beautifully said.
So that quest will never be done. And I see like one of the things that inspired me a lot is like the whole. I'm a huge fan of Bon Iver, and that whole collective of artists. They're musicians, engineers, mixers. All these people who come together and contribute something, and it ends up being a product. And the first Bon Iver record is like the cliched like man in the woods, did the whole production by himself and everything. But everything he's done since then has been so highly collaborative, and I really like that aspect. And it seems like all of those people, they all kind of know how to do this stuff.
Yeah.
So like you can't really be like a singer-songwriter in the vein of collaboration, like how Bon Iver works and his collective, if you don't have a basic understanding of this stuff,
Sure.
And so that was the whole motivation behind that, where it was like, like there's something to be said about the magic of naivete, but there's a point at which being too naive is a limitation.
It's a hindrance for sure. Yeah.
So
it's always it's the fine line to walk. Absolutely. But I have to tell you, and this is something that I couldn't stress more. It's, for me, that's what I think makes artists a great artist, is that sort of, since we started recording, you're talking about pushing yourself, you're talking about trying new things, you're talking about learning, you're talking about growth. And basically, some people can get to their fourth record and they don't have that mentality. It's just like, these are my slippers, I'm comfortable in them, and I'm just going to keep going in that way. And
yeah, there's nothing wrong with that either.
It's not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just that, like, I'm discovering that was not your thought process, and it's exciting to me,
Yeah, no, I couldn't. I'm like a flower on a growing in a mold.
Oh, la.
I gotta keep growing, otherwise I'll die.
Where does the title come from?
The title is, I'm really happy with this title. I've always loved long titles.
Title.
Thank you. I there's this one song off like the epilogue, the deluxe version, I don't know what we call it, EP-ish of Solitudes, called The Weatherman or The Felonies Are Magnets on My Coat. And I've always been really a fan of these like absurdly long titles. And initially this record was entitled We're Growing Like Flowers on a Molten Lawn. And I sort of like, there's a few iterations of that, but the title itself the image came from a dream that I had of, so in 2017 or 2018, I took like a 2-month backpacking trip to Central America, and I ended up in Guatemala, and I climbed this volcano called Acatenango. And it was like a 2-day hike to the top, where like you climb, or the first day you climb basically through 4 different ecosystems.
Wow.
Like a grueling hike. And I was like, in medium shape, and obviously the tour guides are like, yeah, you'll be able to do it, no problem. And I almost fucking died. It was really hard.
Wow. Okay.
And so we get to the top and we camp out there, and so you have these, you're on top of Acatenango, which is an extinct volcano, but across from it is Fuego, which is an active volcano.
Fuego?
Yeah, it's called Fuego. I know.
Okay.
Aptly named.
Simple. Keep it simple. I love it.
Exactly. I think it's called Volcán del Fuego or something like that.
Original, classy.
Yeah. So you get to the almost the top, and you camp out there, and you sleep there at night in a tent, and the stars are insane, and you see the volcano erupt from afar.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. It was one of the most awe-inspiring moments of my life. And then you wake up at 5 a.m. and you do the last like 800 meters to the top, which is just like volcanic ash. Wow. You get to the top, and that day had like pretty bad weather, so it literally felt like I was on Mars. You could barely see. You had this like pinkish haze because of the combination of clouds and ash. Wow. and the pink hue of the sun coming up. And so that image in particular really resonated with me for a really long time. And for some reason, around 2020, I started having this dream where I was in this place by myself, and there was, as the sort of ash moved away from my vision, and the vision cleared a little bit, I saw this lone flower growing out of the ashes, which is an improbable place for a flower to grow. And then the ash cleared a little more, and I saw that there was a small river of lava, and that this flower was planted right in the middle of a small river of lava, which again,
Beautiful image.
impossible. And I thought that that was so beautiful, and I didn't really think much of it. I was just like, that was a weird dream. But then it came back, but it came back in all these different forms, where there was one that came back a lot, which was, there's like that song, little houses on little boxes on the hillside, little boxes make a dicky decky, and where it's like this song from the 40s, which is basically about like these neighborhoods where all the houses look exactly the same, like these communities where. And I'm from just a little west of Montreal in Hudson, but in like
You're from Hudson?
Yeah, I'm from Hudson. You knew that.
Shit.
Yeah, you knew that. So in Ile-Perrot, which is just a little to the east of that, there's like a bunch of developments that is just that all the houses look exactly the same, and that's always been like great for people who live there. I couldn't live in
not knocking you,
but I couldn't live there. But so in the recurring dream, I would have this kind of house, like this very like cookie cutter, regular suburban house with like the perfect, like with the front sort of alleyway to go to the front door, and on either side there's like this lush not garden but lawn.
Yep.
Except the lawn was molten lava.
Okay.
And there was a flower growing out of it.
Wow.
And it was this recurring dream where like I would see this like aerial view of the entire neighborhood, and the whole neighborhood, all of the front lawns were all lava, and there were just flowers growing in the lava. And so, yeah, a dream came.
This image needs to be in a video.
That would be great. And need some CGI. No, I've done CGI stuff before. I don't like. I had lava in the video for Exhale Inhale, and
Let's just go back to Fuego.
Yeah, that'd be fun. I'd love that.
Let's do this.
But so in the end, what I realized, and this is another thing of reverse engineering, is I tried to figure out like, what does this mean?
Yeah.
And in coming up with the title that I associated with that image, it made me realize that we were like in the middle of like the early pandemic, where things were super bleak, and people were at home a lot.
Remember that?
And they had a lot of time, and people started like online just started going crazy with all of the societal issues and problems that we have with one another, with like Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement, and income inequality, and all of these things were coming up in conversations online, and were really intense, and we're at a period where people are very confrontational with one another, and there's very little nuance in conversation, and I found that to be exhausting, and I had a hard time. I didn't want to participate in that conversation because I was like, maybe not in a position to.
It's hard to find a position anyways.
Right. But I still felt really strongly about all these things because I'm a human being, and like it made me really sad that all this is happening, and it made me think about how, every generation faces its struggles, but no generation has ever been confronted with them as like constantly, where we're always bombarded with like all of the fucking problems of our lives and our generation, because we just open our phones and it's like death, destruction, racism, and all this like
maybe anarchists are living their best lives. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's awful. But so it becomes really daunting to exist in a period like that, and I've always been a bit of like I'm not a pessimist at all, but I do feel the need to seek out hope in things a lot. I used to describe my music as like melancholy with a dash of hope.
Yeah.
And I still feel strongly about that. And I think that that image came to me at a time where I really needed some hope, and the idea of a flower sprouting in the most impossible conditions felt like an apt metaphor for what we're going through as a generation. And it gave me hope, because I think that no matter what is thrown at us, humans have proven to be able to make it out of it, and so it kind of gave me hope in it. And yeah, I guess we're just literally flowers growing on a molten lawn where it doesn't seem possible that we'll make it out of it, but I think we will, and that's a message to myself more than
Yeah,
anything else, you know.
it really resonates with me.
Yeah.
I felt that the title combined with the buzzing and the talking of the first song, the way it just introduces everything, and you're talking about your dreams. That's the first sentence of the first song.
Yeah. Yeah, and about half of my dreams, I am another, and that's like a whole other thing. But just like we always wish we were something else or someone else. But
And it's beautiful because, as you just said, it really hits me again, as I've heard you say it before. Melancholy with a dash of hope,
mhm.
and that's exactly what your music is. It's beautiful that you're capable of saying that that's what you want your music to be, and that's what you want to put out there, and that you're capable of translating that. That's very difficult. I could easily tell you I want to make like Tom Yorkish songs, but to be able to do it.
Yeah, who doesn't want to be Tom York? Except like maybe
Maybe Tom
Johnny
York.
Greenwood probably doesn't want to be Tom York.
That's true. No, but it's just it's that
Yeah, but you know why I can put words on it? Because I've been asked the question a million times and I've answered it wrong so many times where people are like, how do you describe your music? And I'm like, I don't know, like some folky stuff. Like,
mhm.
I don't know how to describe. And then eventually you get fed up of being asked the same question and not having a proper answer to it. So like I started trying to think about it in a way that was a little more interesting. That's the only reason why I have like a good answer to that. It's because I've been asked a million times. And
I think we're being tricked,
yeah,
is what you're saying.
yeah, of course.
I think it's but yeah, I love that title. I love the name of the songs. It's really it's very playful, this record too, and it's really impressive how you've really sort of pulled through on all of it. You said you wanted to produce more stuff, you wanted to put more instruments on your songs. It's all there, and the visuals also are very nice. And how hands-on are you in as well? I kind of know the answer, but I want to talk about it here. It's like, I know that you're producing all of the video clips, the photo shoots, the visuals. How much of the record is a creation of yours, or are you just focused on the music?
I mean, there isn't an aspect of what I do that I don't have a hand in, from making the songs to the accounting. I like, you can't really get away with not doing everything nowadays. That being said, like producing music is not what I do. Like I write songs and I have people around me who are able to make them become the ultimate version that they ultimately become. But I do have a hand in the videos and the photo shoots. But for the most part, I think that my if I have to say, like, my biggest strength is finding people who are really good at making my vision become the most beautiful version possible. So the people who
certainly feels like it.
I collaborate with are like immensely talented, and they do so much of the work. And sometimes it's kind of like, okay, here's the song. Like with the videos, for example, the directors Véronique Audegagnon and then Lucas Rupnik, who also is doing DOP, and it's all like it's a small team, and we're like hyper collaborative. And the way that worked was just like, I told Véronique, here is what the song is about in a nutshell. And then she took it and she put her own twist on it, and she came up with these really interesting ideas as to how to represent those ideas in images. And then between her and Lucas and the accessory person, they came up with all these different, like, oh, would we use this accessory, this kind of scene, this sort of thing. And then we just shot it and put it together. So like
Beautiful.
in that regard, I had something to do with it insofar as like I summarized the song. I was present. I was present for every part of the process. But and in the same way with Pietro, you know, I was a part of the process and I did contribute somewhat to those things, but it's not my field of expertise. So
Sure, but I mean,
directing a video is kind of like, I don't know how images translate.
some people are very uninterested in the process of anything that doesn't have to do with the music, you know? I've certainly spoken to a lot of musicians who are like, I like to do this, and then I just delegate everything else.
Yeah, I don't know why. I guess I'm just like hyper aware of how I have been in situations where I've done that and I was disappointed with the results. And so I just don't want to do that anymore. It's my face, it's my name. It's like ultimately,
Sure.
you know, I want to be able to be proud of the work that I do. And even though I don't see work, I don't see it, the work as being as important as I used to. I think, you know, it's kind of like you have good days and you have bad days. Sometimes you make good work and you have a good show, and some days you don't. And that's just okay, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I have a hand on everything, but all of the people who work on the project are crucial to it becoming what it is, you know.
And on those people, I see here there's a list of the musicians in the package that you sent me.
Ooh.
We can't see here, but there's a lot of names. And how many people total are working on this record? Worked on this record?
I don't know.
I just want to give a sense of it, like, because sometimes people are misled, you know, where we can think it's like 1 or 2 people or it's like 50 people. It's always interesting to know that.
So on the music side,
Yeah.
so the way it worked is I hired Pietro as
The
producer.
producer. Yeah.
Yeah. And Pietro does like everything. He does mixing, producing. He didn't end up mixing the record, but he could have. Did a bunch of pre-mixing as we recorded, but he was engineer, producer. He plays French horn and synths very well. That's how I met him, actually. He played French horn on Weird Ones,
Huh.
and he did a couple shows with us playing French horn and keys. And then, you know, he's just like such a cool dude and so nice and
Can't wait to meet him.
so talented. And he basically seemed like the perfect person to help me get to what it is I was trying to get to. And I think musically as well, it was a really interesting choice. And also, and this is a less musical portion, but on a personal level, he was also like friends with my whole band. So it's much easier to work in that way because everybody's really friendly. So the core of it was I wanted the band, which is the same band since the beginning.
Since the beginning, you mean like since the first record?
The first record was solo guitar vocal,
Right.
but since Solitude's tech like
Right.
first like label signed record, whatever. And same band for live and for studio, which is not always the case. But
No, you're absolutely right. It's not.
In my case, I wanted it to be that way, and I think that like we've grown so much together, which kind of gave the result that I wanted it to. But so we started the process with just the band and Pietro. And the idea was to initially just like get in a room and jam. And we didn't really I didn't even want to bring like my songs at first.
Oh, really? Okay.
I just wanted to like jam and see
Yeah.
what would happen. And then ultimately it'd be like, oh, just like give us a riff of like and I'd pull out a song. And then now we have a song arranged within an hour with it. And it was like, okay, well, I guess we'll record this. And we ended up doing it this way. We did most of the bed tracks at like a cottage that I rented. And like got a bunch of studio gear and just like brought it I brought like all these carpets, like
Oh, really?
I brought like lamps. I brought plants to the studio to the
As you should. As
yeah,
you should.
I was there for a month. Like I rented a truck and I basically moved in a whole
Love it.
thing, and we recorded a bunch of stuff, a bunch of different ideas, and then initially I really wanted it to be like the other records where it was the whole band all the time, and I very quickly realized that too many cooks in the kitchen, even if all the cooks are like Chef Ramsay, it's still too many cooks.
Too many Ramsays.
Too many Ramsays.
I get it.
So you end up having like, it's not even butting heads. It's just nobody takes a lead in a circumstance like that. So
Yeah.
So after that run, Pietro and I took a step back and started evaluating what we did there and putting it all together and seeing what we wanted to add. And then from there, it became a more one-on-one project where we would call in the band whenever we needed, you know, an extra bass track or an extra drum track, and we just built on those songs. And there were a couple of them, like La Lune est morte de rire, for example, where we did a whole recording and it was kind of trash. So we scrapped it and we didn't like the arrangement, and we're like, okay, let's start it from scratch. Let's no more guitar. Let's do it on the piano, and then like, oh, maybe this arpeggiator thing, and we just tried a bunch of stuff, and then later had the band come in and like add their touches to it.
Gotcha. So the core of the songs was done before bringing in additional players.
Yeah. So the additional players afterwards, it was really like, oh, I've never had a saxophone player, and there's no saxophone on these songs, but there's one song from B-sides that has this crazy tenor sax solo from this guy Adam Kenner, who just like, I can't wait to release that song. It's gonna be
Sick.
so good. It's not on this record though, because it's like a 9-minute 2-chord song with like 2 like really long, beautiful sax solos. So it didn't really fit in this vibe. We had a couple of like long
9 minutes.
Yeah, it's a good song.
All right, so we're going Pink Floyd here.
Yeah, well, kind of, yeah. So we did that. We had like a koto player come in and do some stuff.
A what?
A koto. It's large Japanese harp. It's just,
Oh,
like,
and you
huge
play with the
sticks.
oh,
Yeah.
man, a
And she,
koto.
yeah, and
Right.
she Sarah Paget, her name is. She's amazing.
Gotcha.
And you hear a little bit of it on Sandy Cove, but another song from the B-sides has a little bit more of it. So super
That's
interesting
what that was.
instrument, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we wanted to have some horn arrangements with Pietro being a French horn player. Obviously, we had a bunch of French horn, and we had some trombone and some trumpet that we added
Amazing.
as well.
Yeah, it's very so many strings, so many beautiful strings and brass.
Yeah, the strings were like the base of that was Marianne Hull, who was in the band for all those years and who wrote a bunch of the arrangements, and she played cello and overdubbed some cello stuff, and we were not sure whether or not we were going to do like a proper string section because those things are really expensive.
Right. Yeah.
And complicated, and you have to write the arrangement, all that stuff, and we weren't sure it was the vibe that we wanted for the record either. And then Marianne wrote the arrangement for Sandy Cove, and we're like, oh shit, now we have to get an orchestra. It's so good.
Okay.
And we didn't want to fake it with MIDI strings, so it was like we either do the real deal or we don't do it at all. And so we ended up hiring, actually initially as a joke, because maybe I'll tell this story for the next
Sure.
episode. But basically, we hired like the Estonian National Symphony Orchestra. So I guess like
how do you book those people?
up to now, email.
Sick.
You just email them.
Um,
And so I guess in total, with the dozen original collaborators plus those 36 musicians, plus the mixer, Mark Lawson, who's awesome, and mastering engineer, I don't know, like 50 people
wow.
total.
Amazing.
But the 36 people of the orchestra, they just like they're so pro. They just like, you send them the song, they don't even have to listen to the song. They just look at the charts and they're like, and you're like, okay, cool. Let's do another take for safety, and then we're good.
Were you there that day for the recording?
It was obviously COVID, so I was on Zoom.
Ugh.
So, but I wouldn't have gone to Estonia, I don't think, for the session.
Oh, excuse me. They were in Estonia.
Yeah, it's the Estonian. It's like the OSM, but of Estonia.
I'm sorry. I thought this was some sort of bass orchestra that,
No. Like the country of Estonia. That's where they were.
Well, frankly, I feel that next time you want to do something like that, bring me in. We'll document the thing.
Yeah,
for sure.
Sure.
Oh man. Okay, so that's amazing.
Yeah. So that whole
But,
process.
excuse me, I gotta ask, why that orchestra?
Because they're cheap. Well, no, actually, the real reason is that so Pietro works with a bunch of different artists and different collaborators, and there's one guy, Owen Pallett, who's like a really
I know that name.
well-known arranger, composer, who's like insanely talented, who does like a lot of big stuff, and he hires this orchestra quite a bit because they have this setup that is basically the studio is completely set up for the orchestra, and they get all these contracts from all over the world for movies and for records, and you rent them like per hour for like 2 or 3 hour chunks, and you send them the charts, and they record everything in house, and then they send you the stems, the audio files, and then you can import those into your songs and mix them however way you wish.
Right.
So that is a much more economic way of doing it rather than like renting a studio, hiring 36 musicians.
Man, that's fascinating.
Because and truth be told, if I could hire the OSM, I would do it, but it would cost me $100,000, which I can't obviously.
Is that really the price?
Yeah. I even think that's probably like friend discount, but they're but understandably.
How
like,
dare you?
Well, no, they're
$100,000.
Yeah.
I will come to your session and play each instrument twice for you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, most people do that, and I've done that with like the string arrangements on Weird Ones were. An alto player, violin, and cello, and they just like overdubbed a bunch of stuff, which it sounds good, and you might not be able to tell the difference, but like for sure the players kind of think, and like Marianne, the arranger, is like, this is kind of bullshit. But
she wrote that section that they played.
Yes, she wrote Sandy Cove, Owen ended up writing the arrangement for My Burrow, and then there's some strings in Rain Checks for All My Friends that Pietro wrote, but that Owen improved on, and those were the 3 songs we did with him.
Just out of curiosity, of course, your first record, as you said, is acoustic, so guitar, voice. I'm assuming that that's how you wrote the songs. You were sitting with a guitar, and that was the instrument of composition for those songs.
Not in this case. Like I was saying earlier.
Sorry, for the first record.
For the first record, yeah.
Yeah, and so in comparison to this record, you told me that you wanted to put the guitar aside, that you wrote a lot of songs on piano. And just out of curiosity, were there any songs that were sort of just written like, what's the most unlikely scenario of a creation for one of these songs, for example?
The most unlikely scenario?
Yes, so like the furthest away from guitar and vocals, should I say, in terms of composition?
Probably La Lune was already composed when we arranged it. I think in terms of arrangement, that was the furthest from the type of process that we've done, because we really built it like from scratch in the studio as like, oh, what if we like added this random noise, and then then we add this here. So like I think composition and arrangement became sort of one for some songs, which was not a usual thing for me. It was
composition and arrangement. Yeah, I understand.
So, and recording also at the same time, as opposed to the process of like, okay, here's a full song, now let's go to the studio and see how we record it.
Right.
This was kind of like, okay, I do have a full song, but I don't want it to sound like this, or I don't want it to be guided by a basic instrument, so we arrange it completely differently.
So in that way, it's your most open record in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Most collaborative and
yeah. I mean, there were some songs that were just like classic, you know, couple chords and couple chords in the truth. And
whatever. I don't want to brag.
No, that's not how they describe country music, is just 2 chords in the truth.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I like that. I did not make that up. That's probably Willie Nelson or something.
A couple chords in the truth.
Yeah.
Psht.
Yeah.
Man, I love it. We've already been talking for an hour.
Oh.
So I suggest that you stick around, because on the next episode, we will be breaking down the first song off of the record, End Scene. We will be listening to some demos as well, and there is going to be a lot more to come. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks for hosting this.
My pleasure. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
All right.
In about half of my dreams, I am enough.